Greetings, Toffees. Welcome back to the Blue Frontier. James here, joined by Shan following Man City 2, Everton 0 at the Etihad. Erling Haaland's second half brace buried the Toffees today, and that moves Everton to winless in 18 against the blue half of Manchester. Frustrating day, felt a little inevitable at points. City really kind of dominated, especially as we got into the second half, but a decent first half showing for Everton. We will get into breaking down the match here shortly. Before we do that, just a reminder, if you're watching us on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you're listening, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We really appreciate that. Help get the word out about the show. And join our Discord. Follow us on socials. All of the links will be in the description. All right, Sean, let's just get into it. A summary quote of the day. It was your turn to pick.
Yeah, so for me, I got to go with good friend of the pod and just OG on the Discord, Bluest 192, high-profile insider. We did a lot of good things in the first half, especially, but fine margins, game of moments, etc. Poor defending on both goals. Felt like we weren't getting back into it after that. Not a big deal. On to the next, and I think we both share that sentiment. It's just one of those days. You face a really good team, and it's a day where they took advantage of those moments and we didn't. But getting into the lineups, I will start with City and then James will go with Everton. A few changes for them from their 1-0 win at Brentford. Looking at just center back Nathan Ake. Everton fans know him well just with the summer links for Josko Gvardiol, which I think was a boost for us going into it, as well as Nico Gonzalez for Rodri, who seems like he's hurt again. But then if something that hurt us, at least on the preview, and then it came to reality, it was Jeremy Doku coming in for Oscar Bob. Of course, Jeremy Doku having a fantastic season. And then if looking at the midfield balance, you have Phil Foden and Tijani Reinders, who's had a good really start to the Premier League life, and Erling Haaland is healthy and ready to go. So just a really good lineup for City. You have a lot of talent in there, but I think if Everton fans were looking for something to kind of pinpoint as a place of kind of weakness, it's probably their defensive line.
Yeah, just quickly on City, kind of an embarrassment of riches, especially you look at their bench, the guys they don't even have to play. You mentioned their back line. That Ake-Diaz combo, I did feel a little bit like there's maybe opportunities here for Everton to take advantage. Nico O'Reilly having kind of a great sophomore campaign in the Premier League, at least on initial evidence. But and then Donnarumma, kind of just hilarious how they just spent all the money on James Trafford, and then they bring in Donnarumma, who is sensational in net. And then you look at the lineup that David Moyes went with on the day, and really not super surprising, kind of minimal changes from his point of view. We, of course, know that Jack Grealish was not able to play due to the Premier League's insistence that lone players can't play for their parent club. Kind of an annoying rule, and I've heard some mutterings about potentially looking to change that, which would have benefited Everton today. But regardless, it's Charlie Alcaraz coming in, basically the only change. And instead of getting Iliman Ndiaye on the left, we keep Ndiaye on the right-hand side. Charlie goes straight into the left. Otherwise, pretty much what you would expect. Beto leads the line again.
Yeah, I think it's tough, James, right, because of the impact of somebody like Charlie, right, especially centrally. But then you want to reward a player like Charlie for the great cameo that he had against Palace. So kind of one of those situations that, whatever Moyes did, I think you could understand. I think there's a lot of logic behind it. And I think given the lineups and given what we had available, I think, all in all, a pretty good lineup by our manager.
Nevertheless, there's still some difficult matchups in here for Everton when you look off the ball, starting with Doku, who is off to a really fast start this season. He did miss the last match against Brentford, but his numbers in the Premier League so far, over 6 shot-created actions per 90, and going up against Jake O'Brien. Look, it's not Jake's fault, but he's got a lot of tough matchups, and teams will definitely look to target him this season, and today was no exception. So I was really interested to see how City would look to take advantage and how Ndiaye would look to support him on that right-hand side. And then, of course, the other one is just Erling Haaland. He is a nightmare matchup for pretty much any defense in world football, and he is very active this season. He's getting nearly 4.5 shots per game with a relatively high XG per shot as well. So not just fleeting chances, they are getting him the ball with good chances to score. So not really surprising there, but before the match, I was like, well, we probably should try to keep Haaland contained, and I think we all saw how that went.
Yeah, and let's get into the match. Pretty decent start for Everton. It was just funny, James. I looked up, and it was like the 11th minute already, and it just felt like the game almost like teleported. But City kind of start to gain a little bit control after the 10th minute. They're finding space, moving between the lines, and then we get to the 13th minute, really, where I think Everton fans are a bit frustrated, probably classified as a big chance. You look at the Ake pass intercepted by Iliman Ndiaye. We're going to speak about him a ton today. Intercepted by Ndiaye in the early buildup. A very good pass across goal to Beto. If you first look, it looks like just a massive sitter, and it's just kind of continued frustration.
When you know chances against City are going to be fleeting and very few and far between, this chance really stands out so early on with an opportunity to impose yourself on the match, take an early lead, and changes the dynamic entirely. It's phenomenal by Ndiaye, reads the play really well, jumps in front, very direct, and I want to say Beto, too, does everything right here except the finish. And I do think it's a little deceiving. Yes, there's not really anyone around him because of how good his movement was to free himself. But the pass is just a little bit in front of him where he's lunging for it at almost full speed. So it's not as easy a chance as it looks to be maybe on first watch, but it's one where we're not going to create many better. You know, even in the 13th minute, that's going to be a one that looms large when the final whistle blows.
But at the same time, I think we still had a pretty good stable hold in the game. City started to get into their pass sequences, a lot of passing on the top of the 18. And then we really get to the 24th. This was kind of the start of collecting corners for them. And then, of course, Erling Haaland, credit to him, kind of on the 12, hits a header and it rips off the crossbar. So for us, I think that's their biggest chance, and I think put us on in a little bit of caution, but at the same time, I think we still feel okay, especially getting away with that one.
Yeah, and with City, every time we play them, it's a war of attrition. They're just going to wear you down. They're going to find good opportunities. They're going to create chances, and how long can you hold strong and withstand the pressure? And furthermore, like Everton come down the other direction, this is almost another very big chance for Beto. Again, the movement, great. Running across the box to receive it. He ends up being probably just marginally offside, but he can't get the shot on target, which is frustrating, even if he would have been offside. Those chances, so few, and Beto unable to get either one on target. So that was a bit of a concern, and really the best opportunities Everton would have in the entire game.
Yeah, and I think as the game went on, his hold-up play started to get better, and he was the one that started that play. But then we get to the 40th minute where, of course, Iliman Ndiaye, just an amazing sequence for him. It almost felt like video game watching this again. He wins the ball off Doku, of course, plays it into the box. It comes back out to him, and he just instantly just gets away from the defense. A shimmy of just incredible nimbleness, and then creates a shot. It's a good save by Donnarumma, and I think for us, it's just a little bit of a relief, right, to get the ball on the net and kind of put them in a little bit of danger, just given the flow of the game.
Almost entirely through just Ndiaye being an absolute animal in this one play. He wins the ball originally, he drives it forward, he gets it forward with the pass, and then he gets it back and creates the shot pretty much all by himself, surrounded by 3 or 4 defenders at the same time. I mean, he was putting on a show in this first half individually. The rest of the team almost could just put their feet up and watch him work because it was that good. Remarkable, and creates a great chance here. It's a good save from Donnarumma as well, as you point out. That's Everton's first corner of the game. City might have had at least 5 at this point. Unfortunately, right off the back of that, just a couple minutes later, James Garner gets caught in possession a little bit. It's a bad giveaway, and City are breaking. They have numbers. I think it's like a 4v2 going towards us. Doku gets a good shot, but Pickford makes a really good save here. And again, you're talking end of the first half. It's still level somehow. And thanks to Jordan Pickford for that. City have a couple more chances. There's another corner where Ake gets his head on it. Not super close. It goes a few yards wide. And then in stoppage time of the first half, Savinho, this long ball, the first touch, City fans see this every week, so it's no surprise to them, to just totally rinse Mikalenko, who's trying to close him down, goes right by him and then gets the shot off. Pickford saves it near post, and we go into halftime level. As you said, Shan, at the top, Everton looked maybe to have a little bit more of the ball like the first 5 minutes, but it became clear as the half wore on that what the approach was from David Moyes. Let City have the ball, try to prevent them from really getting in behind, and honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, Everton created a couple solid chances, and you could argue maybe we're unlucky not to be ahead at this point.
Yeah, like you said, James, we had some good chances. So, I mean, that's pretty much what you can ask for, right? When you go to City, they ended up having 8 corners in the first half, and then if you look at just the XG numbers, pretty even, like all things considered. We're at 0.66, they're at 0.87. You look at Jordan Pickford, right? He just made some big saves for us to stay in it. So, I would take 0-0, right, going into the second half. But as you mentioned, our team was starting to tire because you saw City really start to be able to possess the ball, move it around really easily. And like you mentioned, their winger's first touch, they could just kind of skate by us and getting into the box. And the amount of times you're able to defend that successfully gets a little bit more scary as the game goes on.
Yeah, you're just wondering when they're finally going to have that breakthrough. I will say on the numbers in the first half, I think they gave that first Beto chance on the Ndiaye cross like 0.6 XG. So that's 0.6 of our total 0.66. So that was the chance of the first half. That's a little unfair on Beto. If you watch it enough, you can see there are some challenges. Nevertheless, an elite striker gets on the end of that and buries it. I do think there's reasonable frustration there. Needless to say, Everton missed their couple of opportunities, and then City came out in the second half looking for blood, and it didn't take them long to draw it. In the 57th minute, Haaland gets the goal, and it's really kind of a defensive lapse by Everton on a number of fronts. I think here, the thing that I notice, it's a pretty high defensive line. Like, we're trying to keep our midfield and center halves pretty compact, pretty tight, and Doku kind of moves inside, which draws Jake O'Brien inside as well. Ndiaye is looking out wide. He kind of tries to cut the passing lane, but just a second too late in the through ball. The through ball is clean. And O'Reilly's making a really good run here. He just anticipates it really well. Ndiaye kind of turns, so his body's facing toward the ball, and before you know it, it's behind him, and O'Reilly's free. Everton have to drop really quickly here, right? You know that City, with time and space, are going to be super dangerous. O'Reilly puts the cross in, and it's Erling Haaland who, look, his movement in the box, world class. And he just holds his run super well, while Tark and Keane are dropping directly to the 6 to try to defend. He just lags behind them a little bit in perfect time to just get his head right on the cross and bury it. And Everton are down 1-0 just like that. And I don't know, Shan, every time we play City, it feels like the first goal is kind of just the straw that breaks the camel's back. We look to hold out for a draw at the Etihad, and this one hurt. It did, because it's that momentary lapse, and City are just so clinical, they punish you.
I mean, this goal is a great summary of just everything wrong with our defense, right? And I don't mean to be like hypercritical of it. It's just kind of the reality. Of course, you can't blame Ndiaye too much, especially given the work rate that he's had throughout the game. That's a really good run, a high line. I think what just frustrates me, and it's just the limitations of James Tarkowski and Michael Keane, of just simply just running almost to kind of block the shot, as a second and third keeper, rather than look at where the striker's going to. And then, like you mentioned, Erling Haaland, just an incredible just header and finish, and a momentary lapse puts them 1-0 up and starts to just kind of almost take some confidence away from the team. They were growing in the second half as soon as it started, so it's not to say it wasn't deserved, but it just felt like we could have held on a little bit longer if we just were a bit more mistake-free.
Yeah, I just think City kind of turned the screws, and I do agree, like, the limitations of Tark and Keane, I just don't think there's really any excuse for. I get in transition, you kind of want to be organized and very clear about, hey, we just want to drop really aggressively and try to contain. You cannot not be aware of where Erling Haaland is. It's completely inexcusable. He will punish you, and he certainly did here. It's a great finish. It's a great header. Pickford maybe a little unlucky. It's kind of straight at him almost, but tough to react because it's hit with such power. So we move on, and right after Pep makes a double substitution, actually, Oscar Bob coming in, and then Bernardo Silva in. Bob moves to the right. Savinho moves over to the left, and it doesn't take long before Everton have maybe one of their better chances of the second half. Again, it's through that kind of high pressure. Dewsbury Hall wins the ball well. We break. Garner gets a shot. This is where the handball comes into play, because Bernardo Silva's kind of going to ground. He's got his hand behind him. It hits his hand pretty clearly. Don't think there's any dispute about that. But VAR reviews it and decides, not Everton, not today. Shan, what were your thoughts on the call?
I don't want to be like this significantly biased person when it comes to these calls, but for me, I don't understand how that's not a penalty. I mean, it's like his backhand too, right? And the fact that it was so quickly reviewed, in those moments, you at least see like a longer pause for any sort of kind of handball like that. And that looked to me very unnatural. And if it's one thing where they gave a little bit more time and decided, okay, it's not a penalty, I would have maybe held a little bit more confidence in just them reviewing it. But it just truly just felt like it was Big Six bias, like to its core. And ultimately had a massive impact in the match. But at the end of the day, it's not why we lost, but I think it's a frustrating moment for us.
Yeah, I think so too. It's kind of point blank. It's very close, and he is just kind of like turning his body, and so his arm comes out like that. But when you're making your body bigger with your arm and it clearly hits nothing but the arm, it's not like it comes off his body or anything like that. I just think you have to give that. And it just comes back to the rule being inconsistently enforced and really ambiguously written also. So it's really just kind of a vibes, however the VAR is feeling that day. And he was not feeling generous towards Everton, which sucks. It does suck. And of course, then after that controversy, it doesn't take City long to put the nail in the coffin of Everton. And it's Phil Foden who makes a really clever switch from kind of the top right side of the 18, swinging it over to Savinho, who plays it inside to Haaland. Pickford and Tark, I think, pretty unlucky here. It goes through Tark's legs, but it takes that slight deflection that just moves it off course. And Pickford can't see it until very late. Can't quite react. But again, it's Haaland. It's so clinical. It's the one touch, quick shot with power. It's low, and there's not really much anyone can do about it when it takes that slight deflection like that. And it feels like there's just no way back for Everton at 2-0 down, away to City, right?
Yeah, and I think really the only criticism you have of somebody like Tarkowski is I think when you're limited on pace, right, you back off a little bit more than you would if you were, let's just say, Jared or Jake. And so I think him being almost kind of in no man's land on that deflection puts Pickford in a really tough spot to see that. And I think that's why, like, initial look, right, you almost think of it as potentially a Pickford error. But I just think with how impaired his vision is, just because Tark is almost literally just kind of equidistant between both those guys, whereas I think a better defender or more mobile defender is closer to Haaland when he's shooting that. But yeah, it just kind of felt like the death note for this game, and a situation where I think you want to keep it 2-0 rather than it turn into, let's just say, a 4 or 5-0 game. And it could have been that way, James, if not for Jordan Pickford. But of course, that kind of opens it up to some of the subs that come in from David Moyes.
Yeah, what do you make of these subs? You're down 2-0. It's 8 minutes later before he eventually does make the substitutes, and it's Charlie Alcaraz and Idrissa Gueye off for Timur Bunum and Merlin Ruel getting on. Great to see him. Shaved head. Looks serious. Looks like he means business in the Premier League. But it allows Ndiaye to kind of move over to the left. It puts Merlin at right wing. And then, of course, Tim kind of just replaces Ghana in the midfield. Moyes maybe looking to get a bit more aggressive here, looking to press higher. Merlin looked like he wasn't 100% sure exactly what he was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, this felt like one of those kind of funny highlights where you see a player give like a note to another player and it just got lost in translation on what they were supposed to do. I like the Tim sub. If you're trying to chase a game and kind of create chaos, Tim is kind of the perfect guy to bring in. Ndiaye being on the left was, of course, encouraging for us. It's just one of those cases where I think from Moyes' standpoint, maybe it's just getting a little bit more size up there on some of the kind of more progressive actions, which ended up kind of happening for Merlin in one instance. But it makes me a little bit worried in regards to where Merlin will eventually play as the season goes out. Is he going to turn into a bit of a Swiss Army knife going into certain spots and not being able to get comfortable? Or was this truly the game was kind of over and getting guys on the pitch?
Well, I feel like there's maybe an element of that, but it also felt like Moyes was trying to push Everton to get back into it because you see us start to extend out a little bit more. Not super coherently, though, is the thing. Like, you've got some guys pressing, but we're not pressing as a unit. City, to begin with, are super press resistant. They're incredible on the ball. They're very composed. And so it's not easy. If you're going to try, you need to be very disciplined and organized. And it didn't feel like that. And then the 74th minute, Tierno Barry gets his shot, comes on for Beto. And this is where Barry was definitely trying to press. I mean, he was chasing down Donnarumma a few times, and other guys were just standing around and watching him. When you've had maybe 25% of the ball the entire game, it makes sense that guys are gassed at this point and really can't run up. And you're going to expose yourself if you get too overextended. It results in City almost making it very ugly over the course of the next few minutes. The triple sub in the 85th minute. I mean, they bring in Rico Lewis for O'Reilly, the youth factor, Strong for City, Cherky for Savinho, and Kovacic, who hasn't even played for them this season, on for Nico Gonzalez. It's like, compared to our subs, all coherent, gives them even more quality on the ball, and the perfect kind of combination of guys to see the game out.
The reason Mateo Kovacic hasn't played this season is I think he had a hair transplant in Turkey, because I've never seen that amount of hair on his head. It was as fresh as you could ever see. Like, I mean,
the lettuce going strong.
He had the lettuce going, yeah. So, I mean, credit to him. But then we make some subs, maybe not as exciting. But Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, James, news to us that he can be subbed. So, throw out the bat signals, tell your mom, tell your dad. For Dwight McNeil of all people, so that I got a chuckle of.
It's crazy, man. He subs out Dewsbury-Hall eventually to play Dwight in the middle and move Merlin over to the left, and then brings on Dibbling for Ndiaye, which fine. Ndiaye had to
that makes sense.
Work his tail off and had performed well.
100%.
Dibbling gets his look, but again, I think at this point it is a little bit of just get guys minutes. I don't really think there was ever a chance of Everton getting back into it, and they certainly didn't. Again, Haaland had 3 or 4 good chances in the last, 5 minutes of regular time plus the 7 minutes of stoppage, where we did overextend. We were disorganized, and it just allowed them multiple opportunities to make it 3-4, maybe 5-0. But Pickford stood strong, and the defense eventually held it at 2. Takes us to full time, Sean. Your thoughts as the final whistle blew?
I just think it was a day where they took their chances and we didn't, right? And you look at kind of 2 weeks ago against Palace, right, where they essentially just missed a bunch of chances, and the few that we had, we took advantage of. And I think it's just kind of an interesting role reversal when you look at just a situation where we weren't clinical. And of course, when you're facing competition like Manchester City, you have to be. And I thought we gave it a good run, but ultimately when the second goal went in and we didn't get really the grace of VAR to kind of help us out, the story wrote itself after that.
Yeah, I do think it's tough that the 2 goals for City come within 5 minutes of one another. And so the game's almost over before Moyes can really adjust. We never really got to see how he would approach it at 1-0, where you have an opportunity to still take something from the game. At 2-0, it felt a little bit too far gone. Nevertheless, I was still a little bit frustrated with how City got much better, it felt like, even after they scored those 2 goals, and we just kind of wilted and withered. And that's supported by some of the numbers. I mean, they had 7 shots to our 1 after they had already scored 2. Now, I know a lot of them came late as we really tried to push to do something in front of goal, but 77% possession to 22 for Everton. They had 6 dribbles to our 2. We out-tackled them, but beyond that, it was really all City, and that first goal went in, and then it galvanized City to push on, and they're like, oh, we're actually way better than these guys, and we can kind of just dominate them. And they had no issues doing that.
Yeah, and it just felt like a very pedestrian performance by most of our midfield, and it just felt like, I think, the team did what they could to stay in it in the first half, but it was just a very disjointed kind of performance after City just really started to kind of turn the screws up and get just so confident within the game.
Yeah, and this is the tale of Everton against City for almost as long as I can remember. It's 18 matches since we last beat them. That infamous 4-0, the Ademola Lookman and Tom Davies game. That feels like an absolute eternity ago. And it always feels a little bit like this, of you go to the Etihad specifically and you just hope to batten down the hatches. You hope to weather the storm. You hope you can keep it at 0-0 for as long as humanly possible. But City are just always sort of poking, penetrating, and then they eventually kind of find their rhythm, find their way through, and the dam breaks, and it's too far for Everton to come back. And I just think their dominance in possession, in theory, could have given Everton opportunities to break, but our long distribution was all over the place. I mean, 41% on long balls. So we were sending a lot of things long to no one. And I want to give Beto credit because I thought he worked incredibly hard trying to hold the ball up, especially into the later stages of the first half. Actually looked pretty good holding the ball up and did it pretty effectively. But that long ball tactic, I mean, City eat that up because so often we were just giving the ball right back to them, recycle possession. They're so comfortable and just made it really easy for them.
Yeah, and then Jordan Pickford, just there were so many passes he just hit out of bounds, right? Even James Tarkowski had a few of them. So I also felt like we let ourselves down a little bit today in just kind of some of the easier moments where I feel like we're typically very good. And I think just you can rely on those guys to make better passes. So I also think, too, we made it a little bit easier for City just not being as clean as we usually are.
One of the things that tells the tale, I always like to look at this number. It is 44 touches City had in our penalty area to 15 Everton had in their area. I mean, that's about as dominant, overwhelming as you can get. And then you go back to the matchups we talked about, and we did very little to limit them. Haaland finishes the game with 5 shots, obviously has the brace, 11 touches in the box. Doku created 3 chances. He had 8 touches in the box. Savinho, 2 shots on target. He gets the assist, 3 for 5 in dribbles. Also 8 touches in the box. I mean, these guys ran rampant against Everton, and our fullbacks and wingers who had to do so much to support them just kind of got left in the dust.
It felt like we didn't really actively challenge their back line as much as we could have, but at the same time, they just had their key performers perform really well. That gets us into our talking points, and I think the first one is probably a question that is on all Everton fans' mind, and that's, of course, Beto. One number I pulled, it's a short sample size for this season, but that's all we really have to go on. You know, you look at 8 games played, Beto's XG is 2.94. He's scored 1 goal out of that in 507 minutes. James, are we concerned about Beto right now? And of course, just I think this is kind of an answer or question for the collective strike force.
I would say concerned, no, because I think the volume of chances is just still too small to gather a lot. I am a little frustrated because he is getting 1 or 2 big chances a game and is just not finishing them. But a day like today against Man City is not the game that you draw sweeping conclusions or even really too many observations about the general play of our strikers. He had 2 chances, both of which were pretty decent, didn't finish them, but the other areas of his game were so positive, and he worked his tail off the entire game. And Barry did so too, I thought, when he came on. So I'm not going to get too up in arms about the whole thing, but look, this is very reminiscent of Dominic Calvert-Lewin's days where he doesn't finish game after game, and you kind of patch over it with he does all these other things super well, and then you're 3 seasons in, and it's like, this guy's been the biggest underperformer in all of Europe. I don't think it's nearly that far with Beto because even just last season, he was a much better finisher. So I think we'll see more of that as things go on. So not overly concerned, just a little bit frustrated because if we were up 1-0, I think that's a completely different game and we may end up leaving with a point.
I also think we're trying to kind of figure out from a creation standpoint, especially for our strikers. I think we're a work in progress. But then at the same time, there's a confidence level right now that both Tierno Barry and Beto don't have. And unfortunately, they have to play through it, right? There's really no other option outside of that. Having said that, as you mentioned, they've done a good job in moments throughout the season of Tierno Barry with those 2 goals against Brighton and how his role was there. And of course, you think of Beto and the work rate and some of the hold-up play. I have no question they're going to continue to work hard to figure it out. It's just, it is a frustrating moment right now we're in with the strikers, but we're still just a work in progress, and the strikers are no different.
Next up, we know that per David Moyes' pre-match press conference, Jared Branthwaite is back on the grass. He is training again with the first team, which is music to my ears. So happy to see it. Curious not to see him at least feature on the bench today, but Shan, with his arrival potentially imminent as soon as next week, how do you foresee this changing Moyes' calculation on the starters? Do we see Tark dropping? Do we see Keane dropping?
I think what will happen is what most Everton fans think will happen, and that's Michael Keane dropping for Jared. And then, of course, Jake still playing right back. What I'd love to see happen would be Jared and Jake playing at center back together with potentially Jimmy Garner playing at right back. I think that's the hard part, right? Is, Patterson picked up another injury. I don't know what's going on with him. I'd love to see Merlin get some more minutes. I think it was Bright, his cameo, but it just feels inevitable, right, that we'll see Michael Keane drop to the bench and James Tarkowski be the starter and then Jake stay at right back, just given, I think, the lack of trust that David Moyes has in anyone else really playing right back.
It's crazy that it's a foregone conclusion that Jake O'Brien's like not even really in consideration to play center back, which is his actual position, because he's so locked down at right back. And you saw today more evidence of why he's so limited there, both defending someone like Doku or Bob or Savino, but also getting forward. He just is so uncomfortable. He had that one great run where Keane found him on the long ball and he burst forward. That was fantastic. But beyond that, just offers so little. And Ndiaye having to do so much by himself going forward on that side is just unfortunate. But I think we've discussed that quite a bit at this point on this pod. I do agree with you that probably Keane is the one to instantly drop, but I would be fine with a straight swap for Tark for JB, at least for a couple of games. And then that second spot is up for battle between Tarkowski and Keane for the foreseeable future. Garner at right back's an interesting one. Still, look, I thought Roll looked very good today, if a little bit unsure of what he was supposed to be doing, but he had a couple nice moments. He had the opportunity almost to score and looked pretty tidy on the ball. I'm still not super confident that he's going to play a major role in our midfield this season. So that remains to be seen. I do think we'll probably continue to see Jake O'Brien, but Garner there would be very interesting.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I think there's a few options, but let's ignore kind of some of Michael Keane's past. I think Michael Keane has deserved, right, if you're looking at James Tarkowski and Michael Keane as the second center back, I think Keane would be the guy that you'd at least give a game to. Tark has just had way too many moments this season of just kind of real fear that he's kind of put in our fan base. Don't get me wrong, happy that he signed the new contract, happy that he's going to be a part of the club. He's been nothing but a model captain and citizen. There are limitations that you're starting to see real time, and you saw a lot of them today. So that gets us into our good performance. James, I think you have a good one to start us off with.
Yeah, it's back-to-back Jordan Pickford coming off of the news that he has also signed a new contract. He had 5 saves on the day, several very important ones in the first half that kept it level. And then on the back end, he kept it from getting very, very ugly with some great saves against Haaland. The thing with Pickford today was the long distribution was just not there. As you said earlier, Shan, kind of sending errant kicks out of bounds, wasn't really finding players long. That is typically a strength of his game, but City make it tough. That's kind of the overarching theme of this episode. City are always going to be hard to play against. They are very disciplined and they prevent those long balls very well. So I'll forgive Jordan for that and thank him for a great game in front of net for the most part.
Yeah, great pick. You'd think I'd go with James Garner this time, but I had to give it to Illy. I think it was totally deserved. His stats were solid. You look at 1 shot on target, 2 key passes, 2 dribbles, 3 tackles, 1 interception, 84% pass accuracy. But I think more than anything, just the incredible dribbling ability of him today in both ends, right? And the multiple highlights, I can watch it pretty much all day of him just skating by defenders, whether it was 1 or 2 guys or 5 or 6 guys. I think we have a lot of gratitude as a fan base that he's one of ours, but just the privilege to watch him after some of the players that we've had to watch the past few seasons and just how clean he is on the ball as well as the threat that he provides, right? And I think we missed that with Jack today just because it was so easy to double team him, whereas Jack, I think, takes some of that attention away and they were very easy to just smother him. But even then, right, James, he got out of it more times than not. So just a credit to Illy, I think, let down by the team today because he had just such an incredible performance.
You especially consider how much work he was having to do helping Jake O'Brien defend. That was taking a lot of energy, but there were times in the first half, and he has these moments almost every single game where you're like, this guy is like one of the best wingers in the world. certainly with the ball at his feet, retaining possession, getting out of tight spaces, the best player in those categories that I've ever seen at Everton, without a doubt. It's just jaw-dropping what he's able to pull off. Stuff where you're like, he has no business keeping the ball at this point, and he'll beat three guys and find his way into 20 yards of empty space. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. If we had a couple other players of his quality, we'd really be cooking. And as you alluded to, Sean, I mean, if Jack Grealish is on the field today, maybe things go a little bit different, but I still think City's quality is a little bit overwhelming. So with that, we go to listener comments. We got a couple, excuse me, from first from Mike from the Discord. It was fine. Sure. Solid comment, Mike. Thank you for your contributions. Sludvigs then said, good first half. The quality of City shown through in the second half. Need to take the few chances we get. I think we are fully aligned there, Sean. We then had Biff the Tick from Blue Sky, who said, the season does not turn on the Man City game, and the salary differential pretty much explains the result. Just to illustrate the point, it's no secret City have an insane squad. Transfer Market has their squad value at 1.21 billion euros. Meanwhile, Everton at 414 million. So you're talking about 3 times the squad value. Those numbers are a little flawed, but directionally correct. Show you the chasm that Everton have to traverse to really achieve anything against City. Sean, any final thoughts? I think for me, my closing thought is we're 8 games into the season and we've already knocked off Liverpool away, City away, which are the 2 fixtures every single year that I just assume that we will not win. We did not win either of them, but they are in the rear view now, and we can look ahead to potentially better fixtures.
I think the closing thought for me is it just feels like a team that is going to be in more games than not. We have this group that is a bit disjointed, but I think the competitiveness is going to be there pretty much every match week. And we're going to have these same conversations, James, whether we win or we lose on just fine margins. And it just was a day like today where we just didn't have them. But as you mentioned, it's really exciting to get Manchester City and Liverpool away off the mark. But then at the same time, I look at the Premier League as a whole. We looked at it in our prior pods evaluating it. I don't really think there's an easy game in the Premier League. I think this season specifically, I look at the schedule and I just feel like every game is going to, have a competitive balance. That kind of gets us to our next 5 and kind of proves my point that home against Spurs, which I think is a winnable game. As much as we've been applauding Spurs, they still have their shortcomings. And then you get into a middle stretch at Sunderland versus Fulham, at Man U versus Newcastle. Some kind of bigger clubs, bigger names in there, but it just feels like the Premier League is very competitive right now. And I think it's just a matter of, when we have our best players, especially Jared, at a time like this, I think it could really raise the ceiling of what the squad is capable of.
Yeah, there's no easy wins, obviously, in this league, but I do expect us to get, minimum 4 points from these next 5. These teams are definitely gettable. And I agree, Sean. I am a little still kind of perplexed at Moyes' decisions around subs today. I can recognize that it's an odd game. It kind of calls for something a little non-conventional, but I still hope to see more of Dibbling. Some of these newer guys, younger guys too, get opportunities to integrate into the squad and find their rhythm, and I think the next few matches are a good opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and then we get to score predictions. Quite a few today. AJ Cholo, High Soccer Guy, TJ Bureau, Count Basic, Mike Kennedy, and of course EFC Jonesy. So great job to all for predicting a 2-0 City win. And looking at what's coming up for the Blue Frontier, we have the Spurs post-match pod. That game's next Sunday, a little bit of a later start, I think, just given Spurs being in Champions League. But outside of that, James, I think we kind of summarized it pretty well. Just a tough day at the office. I think some encouraging signs. One thing that I will mention, if you haven't listened to Moyes' post-match presser, I think he has a pretty neutral and realistic view of where the squad is today, as well as the performance. So from the manager's side, I think you can be a little bit critical, of course, of the subs. But I also think, too, I think we're going to say this a lot this season, the squad is definitely a work in progress. And I think David Moyes right now is understanding that.
Yeah, I would say this fixture is probably the most boring to podcast after in my experience because we almost never win and we almost always just kind of get worn down. And I think it's one where you don't want to draw any sweeping conclusions from it. So we'll avoid doing that. We'll see how things go against Spurs next week. That will be a very good test. But until then, thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it. Be sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us a comment. Subscribe, follow us on your podcast platform of choice, follow us on socials. All of the links will be in the description, and definitely join the Discord. We've got a great community in there. We'd love to see you in there. Otherwise, until next time, up the Toffees.